They do. They understand that this is a key part in a university education. When you think about a holistic education, that higher education is quote unquote supposed to provide students to graduate ready and prepared for the real world. And the real world means you pay taxes. The real world means you need to pay rent. And you need a roof over your head. You need to make sure that you're budgeting for food and basic needs. Absolutely. And ultimately, your long-term financial security. So I remember looking at these institutions and being just amazed at the fact that they're ahead of Ivy schools or Ivy Plus, if I can name them that, to include MIT and Stanford. But they're ahead of the game, and they get it, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
Definitely. Well, so CalCPA as well as AICPA, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, they also have a financial literacy program that they've launched many years ago. I would not be surprised if there is some kind of a linkage there as well for the Kickstart in the public school universities.
I'm unaware. I'd love to learn more about that.
But I remember when I was a board member at CalCPA, I wanted to approach actually Stanford, do interviews with folks that are in the accounting program. In whole, the financial literacy was not intact. This was about 10, 15 years ago. But in any event, the fact that it's here, it's incredible. You have matrix of any kind that measures the progress of the students from the time that they initially started with the program and perhaps as they're going through it and when they exit. Do you have a way of measuring how they've done?
That's a great question. So we're talking about metrics now, and I have to remind you, we're a young program. We're 2 years old. Okay, so our first goal was to build and launch the products and services for the resources for students, if I may. So we're just now getting to the point of measuring reach and satisfaction. So whether it's with our course that's 10 weeks long for a quarter, trying to measure their initial understanding of basic financial concepts and behaviors to what they've learned at the end of the course. We're just now measuring, with our events and workshops, how many students are we reaching? What did they think? Did they learn something from this event or this workshop?
Did those come through surveys?
Yes. So great question. We use mainly relying on surveys at this point for most of our resources. We're just now trying to get into how do we measure behavior change and how do we potentially track, like you said, an incoming student when they come in as a freshman, when they graduate as a senior.
Wow, that would be amazing to
That would be
see.
beautiful. Yeah. And so that's something we're trying to get into, as well as behavior change.
That's a huge one. That's a very large endeavor, which I'm confident we will conquer. But the behavior change, how would you measure the behavior change?
There are many ways to do that, and there's no standardized way at the moment, and that's something that I think is going to take a lot of folks and experts in this space.
I'm curious if you would actually implement or bring in any kind of psychology. There's psychology of money that many people are involved in, and all of us are intertwined with, but we don't really realize how much. So that drives our spending pattern, that drives our income producing pattern, and it's the background in our decision making. So how would you measure behavior change?
That's a great question. So one of the main focus areas for our program has been the knowledge, the foundational financial concepts, coupled with an understanding of the role emotions and biases and human behavior affect our financial decisions. And we've been most successful in being able to marry these two areas.
Excellent.
With our academic course. So we've actually recently partnered with the Stanford Behavior Lab, which is run by BJ Fogg, who's a very famously renowned behavior scientist across the nation.
Excellent.
We brought in his lab to focus on things like habits and structural things that we can institute
Mm-hmm.
or adjust to influence our behavior. So even something as simple as automating savings so that we're influencing the structure to the point that we're no longer thinking of it. It's just being automatically done for us.
So I would imagine you would incorporate some fintech process. And is that being done, or is that part of the projection?
I think that's more part of the projection. I think right now we're just trying to get to the basic concepts of how can these structures be influenced or instituted so that the key things such as prioritizing saving is getting done. So that things like that take effort from a human part. Like, you get your paycheck and you're thinking about, how, I'll save whatever is left after, I spend for whatever. If you do it from up front, just like, when you're an adult and you get automatic things taken out, like, for Social Security, for taxes,
Sure.
for your 401k, then you're left with something. These are all automated, right? The must.
Right. Okay.
And if you can automate not just your retirement savings for your 401k, but you can also automate X percentage for my emergency fund or X percentage for my vacation fund.
Pay myself fund.
You pay yourself first. And it's automated, so then you're now spending what's left over. And I think being able to do that, like even just the simple task of automating things so that you're now working with what's left.
Sure.
Is very powerful.
So is this, what you just described, is this taught or is this a goal?
It's one of the many things that's taught in the course.
It is taught. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Excellent. Because setting away funds for yourself and paying yourself first is one of the most important aspects of
Agreed.
Financial stability, and to be able to convey that and build that habit is incredible. And then when an individual pays themselves, then you discuss expense management and budgeting, and then you discuss as well then investing.
We do. So not just with the course, but with all of our resources. To back up a little bit, it's important also to understand you can't get to the point of automating until you understand how much is coming in, until you understand basic budgeting. So how much is coming in and what your expenses are, right? So it's like till you understand that and making sure that you're living within your means, can you then automate? Like, these are my fixed expenses, for instance, right?
Right.
And these are my variable expenses. And the variable expenses are the ones I can tweak so that I can maximize my savings. And so once you understand those basic budgeting concepts, then can you automate? Then can you adjust your systems?
Sure.
And so basic budgeting is where we start. Understanding the importance of compounding interest and long-term investing is critical. Understanding how to build credit and how to use a credit card. Many students don't understand that what we term as the credit game. It's a game. It's about understanding how to play the game to be successful. So we truly believe, there are folks who say, never use a credit card, cut them all up. It's like, wait a minute.
Not such a good move.
That's not a good move.
Not here in the United States.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is, again, important for international students, our students here at home. It's about understanding how the game works, understanding how to use the instruments, because once you can do that, then you know how to quote unquote play the game.
Yes.
And so one of the things we tell our students, for instance, is we as a program encourage you to have a credit card.
Right.
We encourage you to start building credit now, but let us show you, let us teach you how you do that, because a credit card is just a tool. And it's a tool that can either help you build credit or get you into debt.
Exactly.
It's about how you use it. So if you're using it strategically, which means you're just charging, say, a monthly bill. Say you use Spotify or Netflix every month, right? As a student. Say you have that monthly charge. You charge it on your credit card, you pay it back in 5 days. You pay it, within the 30 days. You're showing that you can borrow something and pay back on time.
That's all, and that's what they
and that's
like
the game.
To see. Exactly. Excellent way of putting it right. It is exactly a game.
So it's not about accumulating debt. You have the money. You're just charging it on your credit card and paying it back.
Or that it's free reign, it's free money, or it's someone else's money.
It's not.
There's exactly.
There's
absolutely
not.
Videos out there and a lot of discussions and conversations from financial gurus as well. Discusses using credit and therefore creating a disconnect between the individuals who's responsible for paying back that money. Eventually creates a disconnect, which is in fact a fallacy. It's false, right?
Also the perception, right? And the understanding is the perception and understanding of like, what is credit exactly? What is this credit card game? It's not about accumulating debt. It's about building credit. So how do you build credit without accumulating debt? And if you ask me, that's the real game.
Exactly.
How do you build credit without accumulating debt? That's because you're using it as a tool and using it for things you have money in the checking account for, money in the bank for. It's not about charging things you can't afford. It's about just charging things that you know you're going to pay back within 25, 30 days.
I'm curious, are you, and I don't know how you're tracking this for the students, but I'm curious if there's any kind of, through your surveys, whether or not you've seen patterns with women versus men, and you've seen sort of habitual patterns with either one of the genders?
We have not.
Multiple genders?
No, I'd love to get there. It's just speaking for me, even for the program, but I love to get there, especially as a woman who is passionate about this space and has seen the research on women being far behind men in wealth creation. And so what I did lead a couple years ago was a Women in Money conference at Stanford, the very first Women in Money conference. Talked all about, the differences in confidence levels, statistical research that proves that women on average live longer than men.
Absolutely.
And what that means. And I found that very special because the research doesn't lie, and there's research that talks about how women, you can talk about the wage gap, for instance, and how that keeps women behind. You can talk about how women don't go for jobs like men do, including higher paying jobs, or promotions when they're not at least, 80% qualified for the role. And so there's a lot of catching up to do when it comes to women versus men in this space, from confidence to the wage gap to name it. And so that would be beautiful to pursue, but for now, we've been focused on the fact that, on just generalizing the fact that personal finance and financial security applies to everyone. I'll call it the major issue.
Sure.
Of it doesn't matter if you're an art history major, if you're a political science major like I was, if you're an econ major, management science and engineering major, if you're an engineer. Personal finance applies to everyone equally.
Right.
That English major is still going to need to pay rent when they graduate.
Absolutely. Right.
Is still going to need to be saving for retirement as early as possible, as early as they can in college, before college. So that's more of a focus that we've been looking at, of we want to let all of our students know that we're here to support them for that long-term financial security and financial stability. And it applies to everyone equally, regardless of major or career.
This is just phenomenal. I'm just looking at my notes. I think that we covered all the topics that I wanted to hit upon. Thank you so much. And one last thing I just want to close with, and I'm curious as to what the plans are for the program for the next upcoming 3 years, possibly 5 years, and 10 years, where it's going.
That's to be determined. Right now, as I mentioned, we've partnered very closely with the Stanford Behavior Design Lab, and we're excited to start doing that behavior change research for the first time, particularly with our academic course that's in process as I speak, this winter quarter. And we're trying to contribute to behavior change research. I think where that goes is to be determined. And I'm excited for it to make some waves and really contribute to large scale impact.
That sounds amazing. I'm so excited for you, for the program, for the students. It's incredible. This is very valuable. In fact, the students will see the change. The community will see a change because the students will take this knowledge with them and spread it next generation that will come under them. And thank you so much for all the work that you're doing in this space.
It's been my pleasure, to be honest. I wouldn't be doing this if I, didn't believe in the need for it at Stanford. Some people may think of, why would Stanford need such a program?
It doesn't matter. All students need it.
All students
all
need
campuses
it.
need
all
it.
Campus, exactly.
Well, it's the fallacy that you think that because it's Stanford that they should know.
They should know.
They should already know that.
Or to figure it out.
Or to figure it out on your own, exactly.
So for me, it's just been, a real fortune and privilege to build something at Stanford that didn't exist, that never existed, and that will be there for generations to come.
Well, Erika, you did it. You did it along with your director. Thank you so much for being part of this, and thank you for coming to my first podcast and show. I'm just so thrilled to have Erika here. This has been an incredible session. I've learned greatly from your wisdom and from the information that you shared. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
And I hope we can have part 2 and to come back and see how things are going at Stanford with this program. We hope to see you here again.
I appreciate it, and I'll be tuned in to how things go at Stanford as well. So thank you for having me.
Of course.
And I'd be privileged to come back and see you again.
Thank you, Erika. And thank you so much for joining us. And this wraps up our first meCFO show and podcast. Come again soon for our second program, and I hope to see you then.